What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today we're back on the Camaro project. So in the last video on the Camaro anyway, we lowered the front, we put the steering rack back in, the power steering pump. Everything seems to be working out fine, but we lowered the front. I did not get to the back. Now, the back, we are going to be replacing the springs and the shocks. And so if we were just replacing the springs, I would have done it in the last video because it's a relatively simple process. But because we're going to be replacing the strut or the shock, it's a little bit more in depth. It's not hard, but it's a little bit more in depth. And excuse my mess in the last video on the Tahoe. Obviously we cleaned out the interior and it is not back together yet. I'm still letting it dry out, so the seats are out here for the Tahoe and pieces of the carpet and whatnot. But disregard that. We are going to start on the Camaro. So the very first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to chalk up the front wheels, because if you lift the back of this, it's going to want to roll forward. So we're going to chalk the front wheels, and then we're going to take some interior stuff out, because we're going to need that out of the way in order to get access to the top nut on the strut or the shock itself. So I'm going to go grab the wheel chocks or just some bricks to put in front of the wheels, and we'll get inside and I'll show you what you need to take apart. So the first thing we're going to be taking out of the car is this plastic panel, which I left out in that last video. And then we'll take this center section carpeted piece out, and we're going to take out this panel here. Now the next two things we're going to take out are these bolts that hold the seat belts in place. Just an 18mm on both sides, and I'm just going to put this stuff in the trunk for now. Once we get those out of the way, you can go ahead and pull the seat belt off of it. It just set on a little hanger there. We're going to move it out of the way. Golly, it's nasty. Okay, we're going to hop in the car now. Now, once we're in the car, we need to take this back seat bottom out. So it's 13mm, all it is, on the base of the seat. And who knows what we'll find in here? Maybe a mouse. There's been a mouse in here at some point. Once we get that out, we obviously need to take the other side out. But we need to take the bottom, and I don't know if you guys can see this. There's 4 screws that run along that bottom here. We need to take at least this back one out, because we're going to have this sail panel out of the way. And I might go ahead and take 2 of them out, just to give me a little more room to move this around. No, this will be enough. Just the one. Let's go grab that other seat and that other screw out. Now the next thing we're going to take out, and you can see this is a total mess, I'll vacuum this out, but I haven't even cleaned this car. But we're going to take this 13mm out, and I found the easiest way is with the ratcheting wrench here, and there's only 2 on each side, and then we'll be able to pull the seat completely out of place. I keep thinking I'm going to find a mouse in here, guys. I don't know. Pretty sure it didn't happen in my garage. May have been living here on the drive home, and from the looks of things, it's having a heyday in here with all the junk. So we're gonna vacuum it out and give them less to mess with. At this point, we can go ahead and unlatch the seat up top. There's a latch on both sides, and we can get it out of the way. Sweet, I got a free CD. All right, so we do not have to take the seat completely out. The seat belt is still hooked to it. If you want to take it out, you got a couple options. You could take the seat belt out here. I believe that's a T50, or you can take it out here, which I believe is a T25. So we don't really need it. We just need it out of the way, out from up against this. So now we're going to go ahead and remove this panel. So there's a couple things that we've got to take loose. There's a clip up top here, and then this screw here on the back. These two pieces here are actually T45s. Not a whole lot to them. They're not real tight. Grab this other one on the other side. Now we need to get that clip up that hangs on it's actually the coat hanger. Now I have found the easiest way to take this out is to get a little flathead screwdriver, and you're going to stick in that pocket in the bottom, and it should pull out enough. Well, it's going to make a liar out of me. May have to put the camera down and use two hands. There we go. So we want to pull that out. That's pretty much how it comes apart, and do the same thing on the other side. Now once we do that, it should be able to slide out of place. It's just Velcroed in pretty much. And we'll get the sail panel out of the way. Of course it's caught on the seat belt. Get this out of the way. And same thing with the other side. Now chances are that probably would give you enough room, but I'm going to go ahead and take these two T40s out. Now if you have an older style car, I think this started in 2001, the latch system was required, but we can go ahead and take these out of the way, and that'll just give us a little more room. You could probably pull the carpet back enough, but we're just going to go ahead and take those out. On the corners here, spot where it hooks. Fold this all the way forward, and now we have access to our top of our shocks. So this is where the access point is. You pull these little foam pieces out. Ooh, it's kind of rusty. That is one side, obviously, and this is the other side. Now I keep these because the carpet lays all weird if you don't lose these. We're going to go ahead and lift the car up for now. I'm going to shut the doors. We're going to lift the car up. Like I said, I already chalked the front wheels. We're going to lift in the center of the rear end, and we'll talk about what we're going to do on the bottom side next. Well, with the back of this thing off the ground, and I have some jack stands under it, but the rear end is still supported, we're going to go ahead and take a 15mm and knock loose these two upper shock mounts. So you can see there's some rust on it. I'm switching over to my impact, my air impact, just because I want to make sure that it comes off first time. Now, if this wants to spin, you may have to hook something on the top side here and then use a wrench to take this off. But most of the time an impact will take it off first hit. Once you get them off, I go ahead and just maybe thread them a couple threads on there. That way the shock doesn't hit you in the face when we get it off on the bottom side. So now we're going underneath, and we'll talk about what we're going to need down there. Now once you're under the car, you're going to see the bottom of the shock itself, and we're going to go ahead and take that loose. That is a 21mm, and generally an impact will knock it out pretty quick too. There is a spot to grab here if it starts to spin, but generally, like I said, the impact generally makes pretty quick work of it. So we're going to take both those out on both sides. Now it's going to be kind of loose because we did loosen the top one. That's why we threaded that nut back on, so it doesn't just fall out. But once we get that out, go ahead and push this out if possible, which you should have enough slack in the top now because we loosened it to push this out of the way.
Sorry guys, the compressor is so loud, but you can see that this one was spinning when I was trying to get it out, so I did put just an adjustable end wrench on the inner part here, and now we'll be able to whip it out pretty quick. Once we have both of those out, go ahead and turn this towards either the inside of the car or back or just away from this, because when we lower the rear end, sometimes it wants to catch this and pull it down. But at this point, make sure your jack stands are in place up front, and we're going to lower the rear end. I'm going to try to show you guys this while I do it. So what this does is it makes the spring, once the shock's unhooked, pretty loose. You may have to move it around a little bit. A lot of times they're stuck. I may have to get my pry bar, or may have to let it down just a little more. It's on the ground almost, but as far down as it'll go. So we may have to go, no, I can get it out. So there, our old spring is out with the topper on it. Sorry if it was kind of noisy while I was moving that around. But the rear spring is now out. And we just got to go over to the other side and do the same thing. Now, if you guys aren't changing the shocks, then the process is a little bit easier, just because you don't have to take all that stuff loose in the inside that we took. So makes it a little bit easier because you don't have to take all that crap apart. Now all you have to do is undo the bottom of the shock, and you can pull the springs out. But I always suggest anytime you're lowering one, now on my Trans Am when I first did it, I did reuse the stock shocks, but they're just not built to last with a lowered vehicle, so they're just going to blow out pretty quickly. But like I said, the process is a little easier if all you're doing is changing the spring. So this is obviously what we're going to be replacing it with, and somebody reached out in the last video, if you guys didn't see that, and talked about how these were actually, even though they're bilstein part number, they're made by Eibach. So kind of cool that I looked for information on them because I've never heard of these before. But in the last video and in this video, I'll list some of my favorite BMR and Eibach are two springs that I've used in the past. And then obviously if you want to get really expensive, like there's tons of coilovers out there. But as far as springs and struts, the bilstein strut is a really good strut, and obviously the bilstein made by Eibach would be a decent spring as well. A lot of people complain on the Pro kit that the rear springs settle a lot. Another thing, guys, is I'm kind of debating on using the stock isolator. A lot of people take out the isolator, leave the stock spring in, and just put a piece of heater hose on the top to keep it from making noise. I think for now I'm just going to reuse this stock piece. Normally I would do that as well. There's just not quite, well, there's probably enough room to slide a piece of heater hose on there if I wanted to go that route. So we're going to put it together and see what it looks like. If I think it needs to be a little lower, I can always take this out, put a piece of heater hose on the top of this, and lower it probably another ½ inch if I had to guess. This top piece is pretty thick. So like I said though, that's pretty common. I'm sure if you guys are watching this, if you've ever lowered one before or heard of lowering one, that's what the heater hose mod is. That's what they're talking about. So now we're ready to get that old spring, or sorry, the old shock out of the way. So we're just going to undo this, and it's going to fall out. Not a big deal. And we'll get the other one as well, and then we'll get under there and take those out of the way. You're going to hear it hit the ground. I don't know if you guys heard it hit the ground. And then, like I said, the bilstein shocks that we're putting in place, and it did come with all the hardware from my buddy. So let's get the try to get the shock in the way, or up in that area. It's going to be kind of hard with just me,
maybe I can go ahead and put the spring in and then set this bottom pocket in, or maybe I can get my son out here to just hold it in place while I at least thread the top on. Well, wouldn't you know it, my son's not here to help. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to use a jack to keep this in place. So I'm going to put it up in the original location. Now I did put the washer and then the rubber isolator back on, and so you need one on the bottom, a washer, and then a rubber isolator, and then the same thing on the top, a rubber isolator and then another washer, and then your obviously the nut to tighten it down. So I'm going to go grab my other jack, and I'm going to just put this up into place, and I'm going to use my jack to hold the bottom while I at least thread a couple threads on the top. So I put it up in the original location like I said, and I have my jack holding it. This is just something that, sorry I keep hitting the camera, this is just something that makes it easier if you're doing this well, like a one person operation. You might be able to take the wheel off and hold it while you reach around and put that on, but my arms are not that long. So what we need to do now is, once we got it in place, is we're going to go ahead, we're not using the stock hardware anyway, so we're going to put, or at least the top nut, we're going to put that back into place, like I said, the isolator and the washer, and then we're just going to thread this on a couple times just to keep it in place, and this will actually be one of the last things we tighten up once we get it on the ground. So now we're ready to put the spring in, and it's pretty much the reverse process. Now it does have a channel for this to set in, you guys can see that. Make sure that that is into place, and we're going to thread this up in there. Now it's going to be a lot easier because we don't have the well, for one, the spring shorter, so it's going to be easier to get into place. Now the downside is you may have to use your jack to lift the rear end a little bit to keep it in place while you do both sides. So generally what I do is I get I set it on the bottom, so that bottom channel I set this on first, and then I gradually lift the jack up and then kind of guide the tops into place, but you'll see that process here. One thing, guys, I forgot to show you is that little ring on the top before you put that on keeps this boot into place. So that's what it's for. I didn't notice that until I was getting the second one in, so just make sure that you do that. That just snaps into the boot to make sure that it stays in place. It's not just hanging on the bottom. So at this point, I'm going to attempt to record. I don't have a tripod for under my car that's that small, so I'm going to attempt to not knock the camera over while I'm putting this spring into place. But like I said, make sure it's in that channel that we talked about a minute ago, and up into the car it goes. Now I like to put the brake and the spring in the back. It's just kind of how I've always done it. And what I mean by that, I'll show you in just one second. Is this part right here where it ends, the spring ends. I like to have that facing as close to straight back as possible, and it doesn't specify that on any instructions that I've ever had, but it's just I feel like when it's, I don't know, it's like seated properly in the front when you do that. But like I said, you can put it whichever way you want, but I like to keep it uniform on both sides. Now this one's into place. It's not up in that upper pocket because the spring's too short, so I'm going to go ahead and put the other one in, and once we get the other one in, we'll start to lift the rear end and then kind of guide it into a spot. There's a divot up above that this sets right in the middle of, so we want to make sure that it's seated in there. Otherwise you're going to be driving down the road and it'll slide into there at some point, or the car's going to be higher on one side or not ride correctly. So let's get that other one in, and then like I said, we'll lift the rear end into place. Now that we got both the springs in place, it's time to lift the rear end back up like I was talking about and get those back into the pocket where they belong. So it's going to be kind of one of those things where you go back and forth until you get it exactly where you want it, and they'll kind of fall into place. So I lift it a little bit and then move them back and forth. I actually think this one's already in. It is. And if you want to, you can see up above, almost through the center of those. You may have to get a flashlight, but you can see the piece that I'm talking about. But this one is in the pocket. Now we just need to go over and check the other one. Now once both the springs are in the pocket, you need to just lift it up until it starts to lift the entire car, which is going to take a little more than when you originally did it, obviously, because the car's lower now. But when you start to see it lift off the jack stands, then we're at a good point. So once it just comes off the jack stands, I'm just a little bit off the jack stands, we're into place. And so our next step is obviously we need to put our shock back into place. Now, sometimes these are really strong, so you may have to get a jack and put under it in order to get it back up and lined up. But once we do that, we should be good. We're gonna go ahead and tighten our bolt back down for the shock, and we may have to use something on the center to keep it from spinning like we did to take that other side off. But we're pretty much done on the bottom side of the car other than tightening that bolt. Now, just so I don't wreck this bushing, I'm going to go ahead and put that into place, that same adjustable end wrench, and we're going to go ahead and tighten this up. Once we have that tightened up, the springs all in place, we are ready to take this thing down off the jacks and jack stand. Now, normally when we lower an F body, because they are a panhard car, so when you get it lower to the ground, it pushes the rear end out. So at some point I may end up doing an adjustable panhard rod, but for now we're going to leave it, and we're just going to let this thing down, and we'll go up top and we'll talk about what we need to finish up. Now, it is definitely lower, you can obviously tell that, but we'll take a good look at it when we're all finished up. So now that we're finished on the bottom, we need to go ahead and tighten the upper strut here. So I'm gonna go grab a wrench, because there's no way to run this down without that center shaft spinning. So on this particular strut, it actually has a fitting in the center, and it's a T5 is what it is. Actually, it's a 5mm. It's not a T5. It's not a Torx bit. It's a 5mm. So we're going to need to do that and tighten this at the same time. Now, as far as how tight to get these, I just go until that bushing starts to bubble out, and you don't want to get crazy tight. And then we're going to go ahead and put this back into place. And then of course I'll grab my vacuum. I've got to do this other side. I'm going to vacuum this all out. As you can see there, like I said, there's been a mouse in it. You can see remnants. So obviously this thing needs a good vacuum anyway, and then we'll continue to put it back together. I won't show you guys the vacuuming part. We'll just show kind of the reassembly process. Once we have our two foam pieces back into place, we can go ahead and fold our carpet back, which down the road, guys, I'm going to be, hopefully, if I keep this car, which I'm hoping to, I'll be replacing the carpet, and we'll do a thorough cleaning. For right now, I'm just going to vacuum it, and this hook right here is where the carpet goes. So once that's in place, I'm going to go ahead and vacuum this off, and then we're going to put those two safety latches back into place. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put our rear sail panels into place. As you can see, somebody put a speaker in there, and that's probably why those grills are painted blue, so you knew there was awesome speakers back there. But we're going to put that into place pretty much the same way it comes out. The only things you need to take note of is that rear hatch strut that comes there. You need to make sure that all that rubber is on the inside of the sail panel as you're putting it into place, and then obviously up top and down below you need to make sure that they're threaded into place as well. Now we're ready to put the seat back into place. Sorry, I had to touch the microphone, but we're ready to put the seat back into place with those 13 millimeters. We're just gonna set it back into place. Once we get it there, we're gonna tighten those up. We're gonna fold it back, and then we'll be able to hook up those rear seat belts. Now we're going to slide this thing back into place. The hardest thing in the world to vacuum, other than the trunk carpet. If you notice, I had an extra one of these that was the darker color, so I'm putting it into place instead of the lighter one. The lighter one just looks terrible. It's got a bunch of stains and the bottom piece is broken. So one upgrade, I guess you could say. So now we're going to go ahead and put the back seat in. I've got this side vacuumed, I've still got to vacuum that other side, but the only thing you want to make sure of is keep your seat belt out if anybody sits back here. It kind of likes to tuck down under the seat. So get your seat back into place. We'll put that 13 millimeter in, and then we need to put that Phillips screw back into the side kick panel here. Well, everything is back together, and well, let's shut the doors, I'll back it up, and let's take a look at what the difference is between before and after. Well guys, we are back on all four wheels, and I think it looks absolutely amazing. Let me know in the comments what you think. Relatively easy project, guys, something that you guys can do in your driveway just like I did in an afternoon. It does help if you have an extra hand, but if you don't, I showed you a couple options of what you can do, and you could even use a block or a brick or something to hold that rear shock into place while you're tightening the top up, or at least to keep it from falling through. But ultimately, guys, I wanted to show you this in the last video, but I just ran out of time, and honestly I didn't want to have like a 45-minute long video. So this is kind of the second part of that video, but I will say I took it down the road and it rides really well, just as good as it did before. So I think that unfortunately they don't make these springs anymore, but I will list in the description everything that I used, tools, products, and I will list, like I did in the last video, some different options. Like I've used Eibach in the past, I've used BMR, I've used the Sportline Eibachs, which are the really low ones, and I don't recommend those for somebody who drives their car a lot. And then obviously if you want to step it up and go to like a coilover, there's the sky's the limit on that. But tell me what you guys think. Like I said, hit that comments. If you do like this video, guys, smash that thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing. Go down and hit that subscribe button, and while you're down there, make sure you ring that bell icon. That way you're notified every time we drop a new video. And I will give you a little bit of a spoiler alert, guys. In the next video, these black wheels that have started to grow on me, they are going away. So in the next video on this car, you are going to see a new wheel on this car. I've got the wheels, I've got the tires, they're all mounted and ready to go on, but you're just gonna have to stay tuned to check that out. Also, stay tuned to see which one of these cars we work on next.